Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge cycling podcast with Benji Naesen on this Wednesday evening for Dwars, Vlaanderen 2021 men and women's recap. If you're watching on YouTube, you're likely watching the men's recap right now. I'll have a separate women's recap video. If you'd like listening on the podcast players, which we'd encourage you to do, we're agnostic as to which platforms you want to listen or watch on. It's all in one file on the podcast players. Before we get into the race, I want to mention one of our home team, Drops Lacole. You already know Drops Lacole is the show partner for the entire year. Drops Lacole competed in Dwars of Vlaanderen today. They'll be at Tour of Flanders on Sunday, and you can pre-order your Drops Lacole kit if you like it. It's clearly the best women's kit in the Women's Pro Peloton World Tour or not. I mean, the fact that it's not purple just shows great insight from Lacole. That alone is enough. But they've got info on the Lacole Instagram bio about Drops Lacole's performance today, and there'll be lots more content, I'm sure, there and on Drops Lacole's IG ahead of Flanders on Saturday or Sunday and during the day. But this race, Benji, you're Belgian. It's one of your defining characteristics. Explain to me what is this race? What does Dwars Door mean? What does Ronde Van mean for the people who don't know, which also include me?
Dwars Door means straight through, and the Ronde Van means the Tour off. So there's basically no real difference because the Tour off goes straight through Flanders, and straight through Flanders is a Tour of Flanders. So very confusing in it, but it's a different race, and I can tell you that it's very different when it comes to the history as well. Ronde van Vlaanderen being a monument to Tour of Flanders. It's been around for a while. Dwars door Vlaanderen as well, but not in the shape that it is now. It was a different race, I think, in 2016, 2015, because back then it was not a World Tour race. It wasn't the top of the league race. It was a 1HC race. Basically, when it comes to race categories, that's just under World Tour. That is now called 1.pro.
Yes.
They changed that name because they also changed the second division in cycling to Pro Tour. But anyway, talking about it, this race, well, I think that I've got an issue with this race. When it was back in 2013, 2014, 2015, it was kind of the classic in which you would see the younger riders and teams getting opportunities in cobble races and also having the ability of showing themselves for the first time. It's the kind of race where Yellow Eyes came forward the first time and Edward Turns came forward one of the first times. When they were younger, they could ride against a smaller field to show themselves on the cobbles, and that way they could get the likes of contracts and the teams they are now. And I feel like Dwars door Vlaanderen has changed that. They were attempting to be a bit of a secondary Tour of Flanders in the preparation of the Tour of Flanders, because now it's on Wednesday while the Tour of Flanders is on Sunday. And that offers a great opportunity for riders that want to ride the Tour of Flanders to have this as a preparation race, which means that a lot of the riders that ride this race also ride it as a preparation race and don't necessarily want to go like the ultimate all out to try and take the victory here. They're going to try and ride at a certain amount, and if they say, I can, I'm in the third group now, I'm not even going to try getting back because that will spend too much energy that I'll need at the end of the week in the Tour of Flanders. And I think a lot of riders in this race do think about the Tour of Flanders a lot while racing this, and that comes into play in the recap we'll do in a bit. But I think that's how I don't necessarily like Dwars door Vlaanderen overly much, also because there's just so many Belgian classics in World Tour that I'd be down to like retract this one out of it and get a Scandinavian one instead, because there's cycling fans all over the world, and I feel like it's purely focused on a lot of, well...
Or a British one.
Not a lot of countries. Or what?
Britain has cobbled streets and narrow, punchy climbs aplenty through technical run-ins. So, yeah, I agree. I think as a general principle, if your race is midweek and not on a weekend, you're going to have a pretty strong argument for it being a World Tour race. If it's a one-day race, obviously, stage races go across. But, yeah, if you don't have the history and it's a midweek race, is it really Should it really be World Tour? Anyway, 184k long race, about 1,500 meters elevation. They do a fair few cobble climbs. They start with the Kloisberg and the New Quarmont with 72 and 80 k's in. Then, after 106 k's, they start the series of climbs that go for about 43 kilometers. That includes the Kloisberg, the Nochteberg, Trio twice, Steenbeek Dries, Teinberg, Kreuzberg, Hotond, and then there's a flat section. And with 23 k's to go, there's a couple of non-threatening climbs left, the Tiechenberg and the Holstraat, although Tiechenberg destroyed Wappen up the other day. And then there's a 11k largely flat run into the finish. So it can be a hard race. We had MVDP, Alaphilippe lining up on the start. I was pretty excited for that. I mean, Quickstep very strong. Askren, de Klerk, Steels, Lampard, Ballerini, Seneschal, got Christoph, Eckhoff, Krah Anderson, Nizzolo, Sturven, winner of MSR. So stacked fields. But you wouldn't know it from the race, Benji, because it was Quebecer Assos taking it up. I think the action really kicked off, if you want to watch back, from about 60 kilometres plus to go, going into the Tyenberg. Quebecer Assos were pacing quite a bit. Ethan Hayter had been up the road for Ineos. Their plan seemed to be to dangle riders off the front as much as possible throughout the day. He looked really good. Quebecer Assos pacing. They go through a left-hand corner. There's a crash. Viviani crashes. One of the Alpecin riders crashes, and that catches Pidcock and Quickstep behind. Then they go into the Tyenberg. There's splits. MVDP is not in good position. We've got Ballerini, Askren, Pidcock, Alaphilippe all at the back. And it's kind of mixed group going off the front. I think it might have had GVA in it, Paul at that point. It definitely had Dylan van Baal for Ineos in it. He looked good at Gent-Wevelgem when he attacked out of that chase group and came in the top 10. He then rode, I think, the plateau for a little bit, and then on the next climb, the very next climb, about 3 k's later, the Berg ten Houte, he attacked that group, and really smart move. He immediately got a 20-second gap. MVDP was nowhere to be seen. He was like at the back of Group 2, and Alaphilippe was in G3 at this point. There was Os, Pollitt, Sturven, Christoph, maybe Nizzolo, definitely Campenaerts in Group 2. They then go on to the next climb, the second to next climb. They do the Kreuzberg Hotond, not too much happens. I think put Os up the road to try and bridge back. Durbridge and Oliveira on UAE tried to go across. They ate about 20 seconds into the Dylan van Baal gap, who's just riding his own pace, but then they eventually got caught. They get onto the Nochteberg Trio, which is the main last climb, and Dylan van Baal does his own pace, over 30 seconds behind in Group 2. Van Avermaet attacks. He brings with him Barguil, Durbridge, Laporte, Sturven, Campenaerts, Seneschal, Pollitt, Oliveira. MVDP goes backwards. We'll talk about that in a second. And then Group 3, another 25 seconds behind, chasing, has some of the sprinty boys, Christoph, Nizzolo, Coquard, Gossier, Cortina, Wellens, and Pollitt, Benoit, and Turns. Group 4, a minute 20 back. Allah's there somewhere. MVDP's gone in there, I think, as well. Why do you think... Well, first off, Benji, what was going on? Why were Alaphilippe and MVDP way at the back today, particularly MVDP?
Well, I've actually waited to hear what he said after the race to really get my conclusions out, because during the race I was like, this is so unlike Van der Poel, and I thought he's probably like using this as training or something. But apparently after the race he said he was genuinely, his legs were blocking on the climb, and he was like, okay, I'm done. And he seemed to react exactly the following words. Before the climb I dropped on, I was on my limit, or I felt that I was on my limit, and I said through my earpiece that I wasn't having a very good day at all. And the journalist asked him, "Were you hiding for Sunday?" And he said, "Nah, I wouldn't be logical. I've never done that before." And he said, "I would have rather raced to win, but it wasn't in my legs today." And finally, he also added, "Sunday's a different race. He's not going to lose sleep over today's performance." So I think that while he probably wanted to race better today, he doesn't care too much about the eventual result. When it comes to Alaphilippe, I don't have a clue.
I
Like
think it was the
the
crash.
initial reaction. I think,
Well, I think that just put him on the back foot, having to
yeah,
chase. Then for the rest of the climbs, and he didn't, add Seneschal up front. Askren maybe a bit tired.
yeah,
I think that kind of stuffed his race up, to be honest. Well, did you see something
yeah.
differently?
Yeah, no, I think that it's probably very likely to do that. But I just noticed that the Koenig Quickstep was so like absent today. They were also caught behind on the
Yeah.
time back, but I've always also noticed that like Ballerini dropping with 50 people to go is a bit early. I'd expect him to drop with like 25 riders left in that front group. Osgren dropping at the same moment seems a bit weird to me. Just a few like interesting points, but I don't know whether I can really draw conclusions out of this race for Sunday. Like some riders will probably have sandbagged, some riders will not have done that, but just had a bad day, and it's impossible for us to guess whether one or the other is the case here without like a history of a rider doing it frequently, to be honest.
So, I mean, I don't have too much to add for this race other than Dylan van Baal got a 25-second gap, and he did not let that gap get any smaller for the rest of this race. Very high performance from Dylan van Baal, who you have to say is better in these Cobble Classics races right now than any one of the Age Desert Citroën riders, particularly their marquee signings this year, apart from maybe Cosnefroy, who obviously is the GOAT, but he's injured right now. So
I
Van
disagree.
Baal, sorry, go on.
I disagree. I think that we shouldn't be too harsh on Azazer, knowing that they were fourth and sixth in E3 as well, because it wasn't easy to get in that group. They made one tactical decision to let Asgreen go at that moment. They were probably relatively a block, but could still post an attack. We spoke about it a lot on the E3 podcast. I don't think we can say that both Van Avermaet and Naesen have ridden badly this preseason. I think that
No.
they've.
I would take
Nah, I think that
DVB over them, though. That's my point.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't
Okay.
because I feel like DVB needs to ride away before the hills happen to be able to stick with them. And we see that every time. I think in Ronde van Vlaanderen 2017, the year where he was riding just behind the attack of Sagan, Naesen, and Van Avermaet until they crashed on the Oude Quaremont, then passed them, and then was second in that race for the latter part. He also attacked early in that race together with Pedersen. And I think that he needs that. He needs to go for that long solo because if he does that, he can stick himself up there and he can stay in that position for a while. So we've seen him do it multiple times, and today he did it, and they didn't come back. And on the Tour of Flanders, they would likely come back because I think that there's also just a difference of it being a different race, Tour of Vlaanderen versus Tour of Flanders. And this is less hard than having the consecutive climbs of the Paterberg and the Oude Quaremont, and also the fact that the kilometers are way more in the Tour of Flanders. I think that comes into play to whether the solo would succeed or not. So very great performance, extremely strong performance, but I think that Van Barle needs a special situation to get in the situation to be able to achieve this, and that's with early attacks like today.
And that situation, the reason he was able to maintain that gap to the chasing groups behind was the composition of groups 2 and 3 for the last hour of the race. And it felt like to me, Benji, that the riders in group 2, I don't know, maybe if they'd allowed Group 3 to catch up quicker, then you could have had more teams with multiple riders in the group, like Campanarts, I'm pretty sure, was blocking in Group 2 because he had Nizzolo in Group 3. You had basically Barguil, Sturven, Laporte pacing a lot. Bora tried to always attack across big surges with Niels Pollitt. Barguil looked really good on the cobbles, but I think the race potential fast race winners, Christoph behind with multiple teammates, etc. Maybe if they conjoined quicker, they would have been able to have a better concerted chase of Dylan van Baarle. Maybe if they came together, then Van Avermaet would have attacked again. And I think we saw some of that as well. It just really wasn't a coordinated chase, which is interesting to me because with MVDP and Alaphilippe not there, Quickstep looking vulnerable. Big opportunity, Benji, for some of these teams to get a World Tour Classics result. And Ineos took that with both hands today. As Benji astutely said, Dylan van Baarle and Ineos, they know their riders, Pidcock aside, are not as punchy as Alaphilippe and Van der Poel, but they got engines, so particularly Van Baarle. So you get him up the road, dangle him. If there's an attack behind, maybe he gets caught, he's in a reduced group, he can attack out of it later, but no one caught him. So he won ahead of 30 seconds plus, ahead of Christophe Laporte, who attacked out of the group behind, Tim Merlier, third, Lampard fourth, Tosh, Van der Sande fifth, Christoph sixth, Van Avermaet seventh, Turgis eighth, Seneschal ninth, Sturven 10th. Pretty good from Ineos. I mean, they get criticised or have been, I think, unfairly for not getting a lot of classics results, but I think they perform pretty consistently. Take it out here. I don't think they're winning Flanders, famous last words, but no Mats Pedersen today, Benji. He was still in
Leonardo
quarantine.
Basso, mate.
Pardon?
Leonardo Basso will surprise everybody.
Wendell, possibly. Yeah, any last thoughts on this race, Benji? Any tips for next year?
For next year, I don't know. Like, it just feels so weird that it's such a preparation race, and therefore it's impossible for us to judge whether riders are using this as really a chance to win or a preparation for RVV. I think a combination of both if they're in the right situation, but I don't think they'll go all out if they're in second or third group to try and come back, knowing that they've got such an effort to go to in the end of the week. So I don't know. I've got a mixed feeling about today. The only thing I want to add is that Viviani fell in the race and is off to the hospital. So I hope that it's pretty all right for that guy because he only just won recently at, that race that everybody talks about the wrong thing. Well, the right thing. I don't know. It's difficult to process, but the Buhani event race was won by Viviani, so I'm happy that Viviani did it. And I'm glad to see him reach for the top of a race again because after heart surgery, I'm always kind of worried when it comes to a rider.